He just worked quietly. For 3 years in the same motor garage on the military base, never speaking to anyone, eyes always down. The young soldiers called him the quiet guy, until that morning when the medal fell from his uniform pocket and the general saw it. Before we begin this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these voices alive. Fort Campbell Military Base in Kentucky was quiet in the early morning hours. The sun hadn't yet risen over the Cumberland River, dew glistening on metallic surfaces, and he was already at work. As always, James Mitchell's name was only known to those on the payroll list. That's what it said on his ID card too, but he never introduced himself that way. He wouldn't because he never talked to anyone for 3 years. He'd just nod his head, say, "Good morning," and get to work. He was 58 but looked older. His hands were black with oil and grease, fingernails that never seemed to get clean. He always wore the same navy blue coveralls with a faded U.S. Army cap on his head. There was a slight limp in his walk. He dragged his left leg as he moved. The young soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division barely noticed him. To them, he was part of the garage, like an engine block or a wrench set, something that was there but nobody paid special attention to. They just called him Mechanic. Some referred to him as the quiet guy. A few even joked behind his back, calling him weird old timer. But James didn't hear them, or pretended not to. That morning, like always, he arrived at 5:30. He swiped his card at the main gate. The MP didn't even look up. James loved this routine. No eye contact, no questions, no need to explain his past. He pulled the garage keys from his pocket, turned on the lights, started the coffee maker, organized his workbench. Everything was always in the same order. Tools, spare parts, logbook. It was a routine. The routine that kept him going. At 6 o'clock, the first soldiers started arriving. First Lieutenant Rodriguez with his Humvee's AC problem, then Sergeant Miller for generator maintenance. James spoke little with them, only asking necessary questions. When did it start? What kind of noise? Any previous maintenance? Short, precise, professional? Nobody asked about his background, where he was from, why he worked on a military base, whether he had family. This was a great relief to him because the answers to these questions were too complicated, too heavy. That Monday morning started normally. James arrived early as usual, made his coffee, reviewed the daily work orders, 5 vehicle maintenance jobs from the 3rd Brigade Combat Team, 2 generator repairs, a few minor fixes. At 8:15, Staff Sergeant Jackson came in. A Ford F-150 had engine trouble. "Thing won't even turn over," Jackson said. "Parked it last night, tried to start it this morning. Nothing." James nodded. "Leave the keys. I'll check it by noon." Jackson left the keys on the workbench and went. James walked to the vehicle, opened the hood. The problem was obvious at first glance. One of the cables from the battery had come loose. Simple problem, 10-minute job. But as he opened the hood, the Purple Heart medal in his BDU pocket rolled out. Purple ribbon, gold medal, perfectly preserved. It slipped from James's fingers and fell into the vehicle's engine bay, right next to the alternator. James immediately bent down to get it, but just then, the garage door opened. "Staff Sergeant Jackson around?" The voice sounded familiar, but James's blood froze. That voice. When he straightened up, General Robert Hayes was standing in front of him. 2-star General, Fort Campbell's commanding officer. Beside him was his aide Major Chen and 2 MPs from the security detail. James was frozen. He was looking at the medal in his hand, then at the general. The general seemed mesmerized by what he saw in James's hand. That's a Purple Heart," the general said, his voice lowered. James couldn't say anything. He just gripped the medal tightly in his palm. The general approached. His eyes were studying James's face as if trying to recognize him. "Soldier, what's your name?" "James Mitchell, sir." His voice came out very hoarse. "Is that medal yours?" James swallowed. For 3 years he had feared this moment would come, but now it stood before him. "Yes, sir." The general's facial expression changed, from surprise to respect. "What unit were you with?" 173rd Airborne Brigade, sir. Afghanistan. The general remained silent for a few seconds. Major Chen also looked stunned. Then the general asked the question, "Which operation?" James's eyes became moist. "Kunar Province, sir. 2008. General Hayes's face changed. Because he knew that operation. Everyone knew. Kunar Province, 2008. A convoy ambushed by Taliban in the mountains. 14 American soldiers surrounded, 2 critically wounded. The rescue operation lasted 8 hours, but no KIA. Because someone, a sergeant, had carried his wounded comrades one by one to the safe zone. Went back 3 times under enemy fire. The 3rd time, he was hit himself, but still extracted the last man. That sergeant's name was James Mitchell. You're that sergeant?" The general's voice was trembling. James nodded. "Just did my job, sir." "Your job?" The general's voice rose. "You saved 12 men's lives. You took a round to the leg but carried out the last wounded." Everyone in the garage had stopped. Nearby soldiers turned to look. James's face was red, his head bowed. "Couldn't just leave them, sir." The general approached. "Staff Sergeant Mitchell, I have tremendous respect for you. But what are you doing here? Why are you working in a motor pool?" James took a long breath. It was time to tell the story he had never told anyone. "When I came home, everything was different, sir. PTSD, leg injury, sleep issues. Couldn't adjust to civilian life, couldn't hold jobs. Marriage fell apart. Spent some time on the streets." The general's face dropped. "Then I applied here, as civilian personnel. Just wanted to work quietly, without being a burden, without explaining my past. Just wanted to be useful." "You've been here 3 years?" "Yes, sir. Happiest 3 years I've had." The general's eyes had become moist. Major Chen also looked moved. "Mitchell," the general said, "heroes like you shouldn't be in the shadows. Let us give you a better position. Restore your rank." James shook his head. "No, sir. I love this job. I love this peace. Just ... He stopped. "Just what?" "Just wish I didn't have to hide anymore." Everything changed after that day, but in the way James wanted. General Hayes made a decision. He wouldn't publicly announce James's story, but he would give him the respect he deserved. First, he put up a small plaque at the garage entrance. It read, "Honoring all personnel serving in this facility." Below, in small letters, "Service, honor, sacrifice." He increased James's salary, gave him special health care coverage. Most importantly, he ensured he was shown respect. Now, when young soldiers came to the garage, they behaved differently. They had learned James's name. They addressed him as Sergeant Mitchell. He no longer objected to this. Some days, the general personally came to the garage. He drank coffee with James. They discussed operations, old days. James's voice opened up during these conversations. "You know, sir," he had said one day, "what I feared most was being forgotten. Those friends we lost being forgotten." The general listened. "But working here, I realized the real issue isn't being forgotten. It's being useful, still being able to serve." "By fixing these vehicles?" "Yes, sir. Young soldiers will ride in these vehicles. Their safety is in my hands. That's service, too." The general smiled. "You're right, Sergeant. Service isn't just on the battlefield." Months passed. James had become the most respected name in the garage, but he still maintained his quietness. Only now this silence was choice, not fear. Young soldiers began coming to him for advice, not just for vehicle repair, but for life. James was a good listener. He spoke little, but every word he said had weight. One day, Lieutenant Rodriguez came. "Sergeant Mitchell," he said, "I have a question." "Go ahead. Do you ever get scared?" James put down his tool, looked at Rodriguez. "Every day." "But aren't you a hero?" James smiled. "Being a hero doesn't mean no fear, son. Heroism is doing what's right despite the fear." Rodriguez thought, "How do we know what's right? If you're acting for something bigger than yourself, you're on the right path." These conversations were changing James. He wasn't just repairing engines anymore. He was shaping the next generation. One day, General Hayes came. "Mitchell," he said, "I have a proposal." James listened. "Would you speak at the military academy? Share your experiences with young officer candidates? James thought. What would I tell them, sir? What real leadership means, the meaning of service, silent heroism. James looked at his medal. He no longer hid it. He carried it in his BDU pocket, but proudly. Okay, sir, but I have a condition. What's that? I want to give that speech in the garage because the real message is this: heroism is everywhere, in palaces and in motor pools. The general smiled. Understood. That speech went down in Fort Campbell history. Hundreds of young officers listened to James Mitchell inside the garage. James told his story in simple language. That fear was normal, but courage was making choices despite it. That service could be done not just on the battlefield, but everywhere. The greatest heroism, he had said, is what's done unnoticed, because then you're truly doing it for others. When the speech ended, he didn't raise his hand for applause. If you have questions, I'll answer them, he had said. A young lieutenant asked, Sergeant, do you have any regrets? James thought. One regret: hiding for so many years, because by keeping my story secret, I might have prevented others from finding courage too. Another question: what's the most important lesson? Try to help someone every day. It's not who you are, it's what you do that matters. After the speech, young soldiers surrounded James. They asked questions, shared experiences. James patiently listened to them all. That evening, General Hayes came. How do you feel? James smiled. Light? Light? Yes, sir. The weight I carried for 3 years is gone. Now I'm not just James. I'm a bridge between past and future. The general put his hand on James's shoulder. You know you can't stay here now. You've become too important. James nodded. I know, sir, but I have a request. Go ahead. Give the next veteran working in this garage a chance, because here we don't just fix vehicles, we fix people too. James Mitchell is now one of Fort Campbell's best-known names, but he still works in the garage. Only now his job is more comprehensive. He became director of the Veteran Employment Program. He finds ex-soldiers struggling to adapt to civilian life and provides them job opportunities. He listens to each of their stories, gives them confidence. Everyone's story is different, he says, but nobody is lost. They just can't find the right place. In his garage now, there's a wall, named the Silent Heroes Wall. Photos of every veteran working there are hung. Their names, deployment locations, brief summaries of their stories. James's photo is at the top. Below it reads, Every service matters. Every story counts. Young soldiers still come asking questions. James still answers with the same patience. But now he's not just repairing engines, he's repairing hope. Sergeant Mitchell, a young private had said last week, can I get a Purple Heart too? James laughed. I hope you never do, son, because this medal's weight only the recipient knows. Then how do I become a hero? You already are a hero, because you're serving here, protecting your country. Now all you need to do is try to be a slightly better person every day. James Mitchell's story continues. In his garage, in that small world where he arrives early every morning. But he's no longer hiding. He's now respected, not because he chose silence, but because he chose to serve. And most importantly, he's no longer alone. Because every veteran has a story. And thanks to people like James, these stories aren't forgotten. Sometimes heroism isn't hidden in grand gestures, but in small moments. People like James Mitchell teach us that real strength comes from silence, not from speaking, but from doing. Have you ever known someone like this? Someone who didn't tell their own story but became an example by living it? Say their name in the comments. Share their story. Because as Daily Soldier Stories, we will continue to give voice to forgotten voices. If this story touched you, subscribe, share it. Help these kinds of stories continue to live. See you in our next video. And remember, sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never speak.